Yet even with your small stadium, you still can't fill it. Since 1965, when it expanded to seat 50,000, you have only reached that attendance in 29 games. Unless of course your fans were coming dressed as empty seats. The BCS were idiots for their opinion of your fans. Even so, Mizzou actually has gone to many of those bowl games before the BCS system was in place. In fact, Mizzou has been to a bowl which is currently a BCS bowl 7 times. KU has only been to 3. And you're a dipshit for bringing it up because by no measure is KU better than Mizzou at football. If KU goes more than 3 games under 500 in 2012, they will have a losing record all time. Right now there are only 12 other teams currently in BCS conferences that have losing all-time records. In fact, the Jayhawks have the 9th most losses in the history of major college football. The old saying is true. You really can keep a Jayhawk out of your yard by putting up a goalpost. Meanwhile, Mizzou not only has 56 more total wins in football than KU but has 13 bowl wins to only 6 for Kansas, and the Tigers have at least 7 more conference championships than KU does even if you count the disputed title of 1960 for KU instead of Mizzou. Not to mention the fact that Mizzou leads the all-time football series with KU, and that doesn't look like it will be changing anytime soon since you pussies are refusing to play us anymore. That is your fault. You jackals turned your back on the Big 12 to follow a few dollars in the SEC. Now we will punish you by not playing against you. Yes, I suppose we will be punished. Now we won't be able to pick up an easy win in football against you the way we did 4 of the last 5 years. Other than that, you can do little to punish us if you don't play us because you won't be able to beat us. We believe the rivalry can transcend conference affiliation such as how we play the Illinois Fighting Illini all the time, and we know you want to try and beat us to even up all those series which you're losing. You know you're in the wrong by not playing us, and taking your ball and running home with it isn't going to get you invited to a major conference if the Big 12 falls apart. Face it. The SEC wouldn't invite you to join their conference because you suck too much at every sport besides basketball. Well then that makes 2 things we get right. Basketball and the question of slavery. Admit it. Kansas was heroic in standing up for the freedom of slaves, while all of Missouri was pushing for slavery and cowardly starting vicious attacks which killed and pillaged innocent and peaceful Kansans. It is true that Kansas was right to stand for freedom, and it's also true that there were people from Missouri who attacked that stance and committed unforgivable crimes. But you've got the wrong facts if you think that's all that happened, making Kansans heroic and Missourians demonic. First, many Kansans were guilty of the same types of murders and pillaging as many Missourians were. And secondly, Missouri itself did not stand for the actions of its guerrillas at all. The state voted decisively to stay with the Union in 1861, and 73.3% of all Missourians who fought in the Civil War fought for the Union. In fact, according to the 1860 census, the total number of Missouri slaveholders was only 12.7% of the total number of families. Those who supported slavery were the extreme minority and did not speak on behalf of most Missourians. The state's government never supported the bushwhackers, while on the other hand Kansas Senator James Lane himself organized the guerrilla Jayhawkers from Kansas. So if anything, the Kansas government might have had more to do with the violence than Missouri's. Well, they were justified. Everyone knows they were just reacting to the Missourians who started it all by raiding Lawrence. If you were talking about the sacking of Lawrence in 1856, that would hardly be justification for coming back to kill Missourians because not a single Jayhawker was killed in that incident. If you were talking about William Quantrill's raid in 1863, that happened well after the Jayhawkers had already murdered many Missourians. In fact, Quantrill was specifically reacting to the Jayhawkers plundering and killing people from Missouri. I'm not saying Quantrill was justified because he certainly wasn't, but he did not start the fighting, nor did he represent Missouri. In fact, he often committed atrocities against Missouri towns as well and didn't live in Missouri for much of his life. Fine. But it's still Missouri's fault. Everyone knows they started the fighting. The party responsible for the tension is debatable. Both pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions started moving to Kansas in 1854 in an attempt to sway the policy, but the anti-slavery New England Emigrant Aid Company came to Kansas armed with the intent to fight. That company started organizing in March of 1854. In fact, Frederick Douglass said as early as 1847 that he became less hopeful for peaceful abolition after talking to John Brown, the abolitionist who you practically worship in Kansas. John Brown is a hero. He died as a martyr for freedom and saved the U.S. from Missourians for years. Not everyone looks at it that way because his way of saving was killing anyone who was in his way. Abraham Lincoln said Brown was insane, and he has also been called America's first domestic terrorist. Criminologist James Gilbert said, quote, Brown's deeds conform to contemporary definitions of terrorism, and his psychological predispositions are consistent with the terrorist model, end quote. One of Brown's biographers also said, quote, a new type of political assassin appeared in the U.S. He did not murder the mighty, but the obscure. His purposes were the same as those of his classic predecessors, to force the nation into a new political pattern by creating terror, end quote. Even the abolitionist newspaper The Liberator said Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry was sadly misguided, wild, and futile. Unfortunately, many Kansans followed his lead. After Quantrill's raid, they issued Order No. 11, which executed many Missourians, forced them off their land, and burned their farms simply because they lived in counties believed to support the bushwhackers when in fact many of them were actually Union supporters. It is noted by historians that Jayhawk raids actually caused otherwise Union supporters to feel anti-Union sentiment. Maybe they should have put up goalposts to keep the Jayhawkers off their farms in the first place. Very funny. But any actions taken in the name of freedom from slavery are justified. As long as you have a good cause, you may take whatever actions you think are necessary. So you think it's okay for a person who is pro-life to blow up an abortion clinic? Look, I'm not saying Missouri is free from guilt in the border war. There were certainly thugs on both sides, although Missouri chooses to identify its mascot with guerrillas who simply defended Columbia, while Kansas chooses to identify with the Jayhawk thugs who attacked and murdered. So then if you're saying that your beliefs simply allow you to get away with whatever crimes you'd like, well then, it's no wonder the Westboro Baptist Church originates in Kansas. Rock chalk. Do you even know what that means? Of course I do. It means, go KU. No, I mean to know what the words rock and chalk are in reference to. Don't they just rhyme with Jayhawk? No, they're in reference to the fact there is a certain type of limestone chalk that is found only in central and western Kansas except for one spot in Lawrence. Oh. I didn't know that. I've just been doing the chant blindly for most years without knowing what it means, like most KU fans. Typical. Rock chalk Jayhawk KAU. The only reason you still do the chant is that Theodore Roosevelt said he liked it. If Roosevelt had said he'd rather be bloodletted by leeches than hear that stupid chant. Never mind. You'd still do it. I'm going to teabag you in the face with my balls. How are you going to do that when you're already choking on them?